The term musicologist means exactly what it sounds like. Ology, the study of, and music. Musicology, the study of music. But in all honesty, that's a bit of an oversimplification. Hi, I'm Shari. I'm a PhD candidate in historical musicology, and my comment section suggests you might not know what that means. I think a lot of people think musicologist is a made-up word, and I can understand that. In the age of the internet, when pretty much anyone can grab a camera and a mic and speak with authority and call themselves an expert, I can understand your hesitation. But the truth is that musicology is a field that is at least a century old and is studied at every major university in the world. There are countless professional organizations and tens of thousands of musicologists worldwide. In fact, if you took a humanities class in college, you were probably taught by a musicologist. So, what do musicologists do? Is it the same as music theory? Sort of. And if you took music theory as a kid or in college, you're probably wondering how someone could dedicate their life to doing that every single day. And don't worry, I wonder that too. Yeah. I'm just going to add a little disclaimer in here, though, before I get into the meat of my explanation, that the topic of exactly what musicologists do is still somewhat disputed by the Academy. So this is just my perspective. Somebody else who is an assistant professor of musicology at your university might see this differently, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, musicologists study the work that music is doing in a certain space. But obviously, music doesn't have agency. It can't do anything. So really, musicologists ask the question, what do people, that is, musicians, performers, and listeners, use music for? How is that different than music theory? Well, that's a complicated question in and of itself. If you've ever taken a piano lesson, you were probably taught something called music theory, explaining note names and rhythms. If you have a music degree, you were probably even taught how chords move and interact with each other. In truth, that's better called music literacy, because you're learning the language of how experts talk about music. Music theorists theorize about music. Now, I know that I'm using the word to define the word, so that doesn't really work. So let's talk about what that means. When I say that music theorists theorize about music, what I mean is they uncover what is happening in a piece of music, how and why. We'll get back to that. These days, there's very little division between musicologists and theorists other than methodology. We call this little m musicology, where music theorists, musicologists, and ethnomusicologists all do largely the same work, investigating what is happening in a piece of music and what people are using it for. The difference is typically at how they go about their study. Historical musicologists use archives, some physical at libraries and research centers, but more and more these archives are online. I study contemporary Christian music, and I often use YouTube and Apple Music as my archive. Theorists typically use a score, diving into a deep line-by-line analysis of a piece of music. Ethnomusicologists use ethnography. That is, they go into spaces, they listen, they record, and they do interviews. And in truth, more and more little m musicologists use a combination of all three. In essence, musicologists use music as a point of intervention to understand something larger. So that might mean something as large as thinking about what people are doing with music within a genre or a social or political space, an industry, or even a culture. An example of this that I use often is that in both 2016 and 2020, many popular artists asked Donald Trump's campaign to stop using their music at the convention centers because they understood that music was being aligned to him in a way that made them very uncomfortable. It meant that their music was being used outside of what these artists and performers believed should have happened. Okay, editing Shari here, I just want to add a little bit of a clarification. When we say that people study the way that
music is being used, if you think of music as a commodity, the people who are using it are trying to sell you the idea of something. So in this specific example with Donald Trump's campaign was trying to use popular music to align themselves with youth, maybe even progressive ideals, to sell this idea that Donald Trump doesn't actually belong to the 1950s version of America that he does. A musicologist might ask the question, does that work? Did it work? I didn't think so. And I think that these artists are reclaiming their agency as artists and what their music means for both themselves and their followers and their fans, probably is a better word, and their fans by saying, hey, please don't align my art with your ideation, because theoretically now the purpose of that music or what that music is could be changed because of its use.
A musicologist might ask, what work was that music doing, and how can a musician reclaim their agency by asking their music not to be played at these events? Musicology might also mean something as small as thinking about what a singular artist is doing in a specific album or song. If you joined me here on my TikTok, you've probably seen that I spoke about teaching a course this semester at Harvard on Taylor Swift. In this course, we discussed mainly this idea that Taylor is both a relatable artist and an aspirational artist. And each week, we listened to a Taylor Swift album, we thought about the cultural and literary and political references at play, and decided whether or not this was helping her get towards her goal of being both an aspirational and relatable artist. Sometimes the answer was yes, sometimes the answer was no. And on the way, we talked about the things that got in the way of her relatability or aspirationalism? Like her contentious jet emissions or her silence on political events. So some of the things that musicologists are thinking about is race, gender, queerness, voice, narrative, action and politics, criticism, which is a lot of what I do on this channel, and more. And a lot of people ask me, why is this important? Well, we can understand so much about each other and the society that we live in by studying the ways that we listen. Music says so much about what people value, and by understanding what people value, we can maybe learn how to relate to each other a little bit better. Now, whenever I tell a certain group of people that I study musicology, I get the, I think, well-intentioned, but perhaps somewhat patronizing question of, well, what work is there going to be for you after you graduate? All right, fair enough. If you're getting a graduate degree, theoretically spending a lot of money on this, which that's another conversation for later, you want to know that there's going to be some amount of job. Oh, what's the word for that? That there's going to be some kind of job for you on the other side of this, right? Well, musicologists work anywhere where music is performed, recorded, or taught. Most musicologists, and I want to say something like, well, I'm making up the statistic, I'm not gonna lie, but most musicologists, something like 90% of musicologists, I wouldn't be surprised, work as university professors teaching basic curricular courses like music theory or Western music history, as well as teaching more specific niche courses based on their specialities. So far, I'm currently a PhD candidate, so I've only ever taught courses designed by full professors and taught alongside them. But one day I hope to teach a course on popular music pretty broadly, just going week by week on the history of pop music, important artists, and some of the things that we can learn by listening to popular music. Of course, most university professors also conduct their own research and continue along their path of discovering the music of a certain culture or re-exploring the political affiliations of certain musicians, and publishing books and doing lectures for other people who are really interested in hearing these kind of things. But there are also musicologists that work in orchestras, libraries and archives, recording studios, and more. And of course, there are also independent scholars who write and live off of their grants and research funding. So if you're interested in more musicological perspectives on popular music, you can watch this video, I hope I'm pointing in the right direction, of my review and analysis of Taylor Swift's most recent album, The Tortured Poets Department. Thanks for being here. Let me know if you got here from my TikTok, and do you have any questions on the field of musicology? Anything I missed? Any unanswered questions? Anything I said that maybe made you think of new questions? Let me know down below, and I will see you next time.